Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is a review of the 1994 sports, comedy, fantasy, drama, mix of all different types of genres, The Scout. Now, this is a film that has a really long backstory in terms of the production of this movie. It was originally supposed to be made long before 1994, and there were all different types of people, directors, writers, and actors that were involved with it. It just never really got off the ground until this version was eventually released. Yeah, Peter Falk was originally cast as Al in 1983. Then something happened, and the film never got made. So then Peter Falk didn't end up playing the role. In 1989, Rodney Dangerfield was attached to play Al, with Sam Kinison, of all people, as Steve Nebraska. If you've seen this film, it's hard to imagine Sam Kinison playing the pitcher, the childlike, just God on the mound that is Steve Nebraska. It's hard to imagine Sam Kinison playing that role. They probably would have switched things around and made the role suit him and his strengths, but that's a really crazy combo. And I gotta be honest, I would have loved to have seen it. I would have loved to have seen Rodney Dangerfield and Sam Kinison in a movie together and seeing how they play off of one another. And I think ultimately that had potential to be better than what we eventually got with this movie. But that being said, it's not a total strikeout. It's not completely pointless. It's one of those movies where it does have things about it that really do cook, that really do throw a fastball, and are really definitely satisfying. I think this is one of those movies that it doesn't quite hit a home run, but it hits a single at least. It actually hits the ball. Uh, and that's more than I think a lot of critics have given this film credit for. So it's directed by Michael Ritchie. He's a very talented, capable director who's done a whole slew of different kinds of movies. And it was fun to see him lend his talents to a sports movie, a sports fantasy with comedic elements. I don't think his direction is a problem at all. I think he did a great job directing this movie. The sports scenes have a lot of genuine energy to them, especially the climactic finale in Game 1 of the World Series. I thought that was a really well shot and well put together sequence. Really gets your blood pumping. Even though it's unrealistic, it's still something that really is quite a joy to watch. Because it's a sports fantasy. The critics who criticize this film for not being realistic miss the entire point of this. This is a fantasy. This is like Rookie of the Year. This is like if you criticize Rookie of the Year for not being realistic. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of that movie, and that's the whole point of The Scout. One of the biggest problems with this film, though, is the script. It's honestly kind of a mess. It's all over the place in terms of its tone, in terms of the story. There are different paths that the story takes that have way too many roadblocks. It's one of those movies that really could have benefited from only one or two people in the writer's room, not five or six. I mean, look at how many people wrote this movie. Roger Angel, Andrew Bergman, Albert Brooks, Monica Johnson. That's four people. That's four voices in the writer's room. That's way too many people for a film like this. You didn't need that many people writing this. And that's what causes it to have a lot of issues in terms of characterization, in terms of the plot and things like that. It's really trying to embrace the zaniness of the overall concept with Steve Nebraska, this tall, statuesque pitcher who can throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball and hit home runs with ease, and he's the baseball version of King Kong, but like it doesn't really always embrace that. It tries to take things seriously at times, and as a result, it doesn't really. I don't think it really winds up working in that angle when it comes to the moments where it's trying to be more serious. I think in large parts due to the screenplay and to what kind of performance that the director was wanting Brendan Fraser to provide for the film. It doesn't come across as very genuine. A lot of the serious and more dramatic stuff comes across as a little forced and not very natural, as if they were just trying to make this zany, goofy movie have some serious drama to it to spice things up. And I think it just could have benefited from being even zanier, even more comic book. Just go all out. Just go crazy with it. It's a crazy concept as it is. I mean, Albert Brooks's character Al goes to Mexico. He goes to the Mexican countryside because he's absolutely desperate now. He's at the end of his rope, almost at the end of his career as a scout, because his most recent player that he brought to the Yankees, it was going to be a can't miss prospect, just choked. He had stage fright in an epic, just embarrassing fashion. So he has to, and the player who I think the guy who plays Tommy Lacey is Michael Rappaport. So it was really fun to see Michael Rappaport in this kind of role, and he just has this bout of stage fright that's just crippling, and that really puts Al's reputation on the line, and he's having a hard time getting jobs. So he basically gets his job back by the Yankees, and they just send him to purgatory essentially. They're like, we'll give you your job back out of respect to you, but we don't trust you anymore. We're sending you to Mexico. And that's where he runs into Steve Nebraska, this pitcher who can do it all. And he convinces him to come to America and play for the Yankees. And then there's drama that occurs because Steve never really had a father figure, or there's something that went on when he was a kid where his father, abused him, or some other things like that. Didn't have the best home life. I think it's insinuated that he might have ran away from home, and that's why he wound up in Mexico. But then he starts viewing Al as his father figure. So then when their relationship starts becoming strained, it causes issues with him wanting to play for the Yankees. And ultimately, it is Al's sacrifice where he's willing to completely, give up his career if and take the fall for Steve if Steve decides not to pitch a game one at the World Series. And that's what causes Steve to want to play and have this epic game at the end of the movie. And yeah, I mean, it's a very simple, straightforward movie at the end of the day about a fantasy for any scout to find the can't miss prospect, and then the drama that's associated with trying to get that can't miss prospect to stay and to play for the team. And there's also a therapist angle with with Dianne Wiest, who plays Dr. H. Aaron. And I think there's a little bit of a romance, but it's nothing that's really that it doesn't really pay off in the end in a very memorable way. But yeah, it's one of those movies where, like I said, could have really benefited from being crazier, even more comic book, because the serious dramatic elements don't really quite work as well as I think maybe the writers would have intended. And as a comedy, it's really not that funny. There's only like a few moments that are going to make you smile or chuckle. I think the comedy is a little uninspired, and also way too lenient upon Steve Nebraska being this weird childlike goofball. It's really treading very familiar water in terms of Brendan Fraser. And what I mean by that is his performance in a film like Encino Man, for instance. So you get some sort of Encino Man sort of stuff with his character Steve Nebraska, but it doesn't come across as good or as naturally funny as his performance did in that movie. It just comes across as a little bit forced, as do a lot of other elements of this movie. But yeah, I mean, maybe it would have been better off if it wasn't as much of a comedy. Maybe it was just, a comic book fantasy kind of thing where you have a few comedic elements here and there, but you just, or maybe just a different kind of comedy. Maybe a satire of baseball, maybe a satire of certain, and there are some elements like that, which that's honestly some of the best parts of this movie, is where it's satirizing baseball and baseball politics and stuff like that. But it doesn't seem like it ever really goes far enough. A good example of a movie that, to me personally, satirizes a sport and does a really good job of that, and a consistent job of that in a comedy, is The Great White Hype. I thought they did an amazing job satirizing boxing and boxing politics, and I feel that this had an opportunity to kind of go that route, but it's not consistent enough. So it really does ultimately become a little muddled in the end. Um, but I believe you actually have the real Albert. Yeah, I think you really have the real Albert, Steinbrenner. You have like the real Yankees folks that are involved in this film. They don't have actors playing these characters. It's actually the real deal. Now, I will say this. I thought Albert Brooks did a good job acting wise, although it would have been really nice to have seen Rodney Dangerfield's take on it, or Peter Falk. I thought Albert Brooks still did a quite admirable job playing this role. You could tell Albert Brooks had passion for this because he is a baseball fan, and you could definitely feel that within the movie. I would say I'm not really the biggest fan of Albert Brooks or his films, but I'd say this is one of my personal favorite performances of his. His character was likable enough. He had his moments where he was kind of a jerk, but he learned as the film went on and he became a better person. So it was one of those things where I was able to let it slide. Brendan Fraser, he's fun. Even though it's not as funny or as natural, or it's at times it feels a little awkward in terms of and stilted in terms of his performance. Um, it's still always a lot of fun to see Brendan Fraser play these kind of boyish, childlike roles. Because and there's a reason why he got those roles, because he was really good at that. Uh, for example, Encino Man, or George of the Jungle, and in this movie, I felt he does have that ability to tap into that innocence, even as an adult, to really uh, resonate with the audience in a different way. And ultimately, you really do buy how much Steve really loves baseball, and I think that definitely is something that came across quite well in the film, despite the film's issues. And I thought it was a believable, physical type of performer as well, in terms of his presence. He's a tall guy, so it really, I think I did buy it, that he was this really big talent. He could hit the ball really hard, and he could also throw strikes and so on and so forth. So I did buy that aspect of Brendan, and I think that's one of the reasons why he was cast. I think also he was cast because of that, because of, like I was mentioned earlier, this ability to tap into that innocence, which is really what this character is. This character is a grown-up man-child, so that's really what this character needed, is an actor who could really pull that off, and Brendan was the best in the business, in my opinion, at that time, in terms of pulling that kind of role off. Dianne Wiest was good too, as was Anne Twomey. Michael Rappaport in his little bit role, or Lane Smith. Uh, I guess Walter Matthau was also originally going to make the film with Michael Ritchie, but then that didn't happen. It's based on a article which had been optioned by Andrew Bergman's producing partner. Bergman wrote the script for Peter Falk to play the scout and Jim Belushi to play the player. Like, this is like goes way back into the 80s. but and he's quoted here. He says like there were honestly like 5 different versions of this movie. The original version was he found this guy in Mexico who was the second white man to ever receive these injections, the first being Babe Ruth, and it was this political guy on the run. It was a completely different kind of movie. uh then when Ritchie came in and Albert Brooks played the scout, Bergman's quoted here. He says, "That wasn't my conception at all. The original conception was much more bananas." I like that. I wish they did that movie. I like the bananas idea because this is a bananas concept. Why not go all out? Why not go crazy? Um, that's too bad that they didn't do the bananas route. He says the Scout still has glimmers of the original, but not doing the original is high up on my very large list of regrets because Peter was born to play that guy. He's so obtuse, and that tunnel vision thing he had was just great. Yeah, I mean Peter Falk would have been really good. I thought Peter Falk was equally as impressive in terms of when you compare it to any of his other roles in a film like All the Marbles. I really like that film. I think that's an underrated sports film that I actually would say is better than this. Um, but yeah, it would have been cool to have seen Falk's approach or Rodney Dangerfield. Brooks said that he contributed to a rewrite of the script because it was written very silly. The version he worked on, he said it did not end like Rocky with that big bullshit ending. But according to Brooks, the studio forced Ritchie to change the ending. I actually like the ending. I don't think it's a bullshit ending. I think it works for this kind of movie. It's a sports fantasy. That's really what the audience really wanted to see anyway. And for a baseball movie, you don't get a lot of baseball, other than a little bit in Mexico, and then a few little bits here and there. I think it was like a spring training thing, and then you have the finale. There's really not a lot of baseball. A lot of it's more drama that's not as effective, and moments where it's trying to be more of a character piece. And I understand why it's trying to be more of a character piece, but it's also a sports fantasy. So would have been nice to have seen more baseball in this baseball sports fantasy. So I don't mind the film ending the way it did because it was thrilling. It was a thrilling climax. It was a really satisfying, fun finale with an absolutely amazing piece of music by Bill Conti, one of his most underrated and most overlooked musical scores. Love his score that he set up for the finale of this movie. It gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. It gets me pumped up every bit as much as any of his other scores for like Rookie of the Year or the Rocky films. Just really a true gem. If there's anything about this movie that really is an absolute home run, it's Bill Conti's score for the finale at least. The film was an absolute flop, and the reviews were mostly negative. It does have its fans, but for the most part, it was critically and financially a failure. It cost only $2 million, and it only made 20. Actually, it cost $20 million, and it only made $2 million in the box office. So yeah, it was an absolute bomb. Uh, and I can kind of see why. It doesn't seem like Fox knew how to market it. And the film itself is kind of a mixed bag anyway as it is in terms of its concepts and its ideas and it's the consistency of it. um, I'm trying to think of any other things to mention when it comes to the other technical aspects of the movie. The cinematography by Laszlo Kovacs or the editing by Don Zimmerman and Perm Broke Jay Herring. It's I honestly think it's pretty terrific when it comes to the technical aspects. Technically, it's good. It's just one of those films that had too many people in the kitchen when it comes to the story, when it comes to the script, and as a result, the movie is really not capable of rising above average. But it could have been a lot worse, and it was worth at least one watch. And it's one of those films that I could see myself watching it as a time waster. If I'm in the mood for watching some sports movies, just put it on while I'm doing some chores or something. It's not a movie I'm going to watch over and over again, but it's a film that I'm glad I watched, and mainly just so I could hear Bill Conti's amazing score for the finale of this movie. I mean, that alone made this worth it, and then some, because that's one of my new favorite pieces of music. I really love that score that much. I'm gonna put it in the video description, the link for that track. I highly recommend you listen to it. And when it comes to this movie, if you like the trailer, if you like the concept, give it a watch sometime. I think it's worth throwing it into your a playlist because, you know, if it's something that interests you, I highly recommend you check it out every single time, no matter what I say. Whether I'm indifferent about a movie, whether I think it's okay, whether I think it's terrible, or whether I think it's great. Um, if it's something that you're interested in, uh, go for it. So anyway, yeah, that's my review and that's my thoughts on The Scout. As always, thanks for watching my review, and I'll see you later. See ya.